Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Dwyer. Welcome to this morning's Track 2 stakeholder meeting related to the Commission's retail access proceedings. We do still have a few people joining in here, so I don't want to go too fast through the initial processes so that they can see those. But Robin, will you go ahead and advance the slides? So for today's meeting, all attendees are muted upon entry, and we do hope to have an open discussion here. If some of you have participated in our Long Island Choice participatory proceeding, you may be familiar with the process we're going to use today. At the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see the raise hand button. You'll select that to make a comment or ask a question. When your hand is raised, staff will call on you. And when you are finished, please remember to hit that icon again to lower your hand. We have a running list of all the people with their hand raised, so we'll try to get to everyone who has a comment. If you are calling or participating by phone, you can dial *3 to raise your hand and then *3 again to lower it. The Q&A function is for technical issues only. We're not going to be checking that for substantive questions on this. We would really like to have folks participating and asking their questions kind of live in person. This meeting will, do not use the chat function. That's, again, we're not going to be checking the chat throughout this. Want to have more of an open discussion to the extent possible. And this meeting will be recorded and will be posted along with this slide deck some point after this meeting. Robin, can you go ahead and advance? So just real quick on the agenda today, I plan to briefly go through some background information on the recent Commission orders, then give sort of an overview on how the staff expects Track 2 to proceed. And then the meat of our discussion today will be some topics that either were identified by stakeholders in their comments submitted prior to this meeting, or that were specifically directed by the Commission to be addressed in Track 2. And then we'll conclude with next steps and the contact information for the relevant staff. Next slide. So let's jump right into the background here. Again, folks, if you have any questions as we go along, please raise your hand. But I plan to kind of go through these background issues quickly, or these background slides quickly, so that we can get right into the main topics for discussion. So, many of you, all of you are hopefully familiar with the 3 Commission proceedings that address many of our retail access issues. Recently, the Commission issued its December 12th, 2019 order adopting changes to the retail access energy market and establishing further process. And that order required, among other things, that energy service companies serving residential and small non-residential customers, we'll refer to as mass market customers, do so with one of 3 eligible products. Those products were the guaranteed savings product, a fixed rate product with a cap, and a renewable electric supply product. Additionally, the December 2019 order directed staff and stakeholders to consider additional energy-related products and services in Track 2, and that's why we're here today to start that Track 2 process. Next slide. So after the December 2019 order, the Commission received a number of petitions for rehearing. In response to those petitions, it issued its September 18, 2020 order on rehearing, reconsideration, and providing clarification. As it relates to Track 2, the September 2020 order directed that the definition of small non-residential customers be addressed in track 2. And I won't read the quote there, but that was, the direction from the order, recognizing that, this definition may need further refinement in the future, directed it to be addressed in track 2, and then a revised definition brought to the commission for consideration as appropriate. Next slide. And then a third kind of relevant order in relation to our directives here in track 2, the January 25th, 2021 order addressing ESCO petitions requesting authorization to provide additional products and services. That order authorized home warranty product bundles as additional energy-related value-added products, and provided a limited waiver for company already offering green gas products. So it expanded, those original 3 products from the December 2019 order to 4 to include the home warranty product. And it did not authorize a green gas product generically, though recognizing that some companies were currently offering that as their only gas product. It did provide those companies already offering a green gas product to continue to serve those existing customers with such a product while track 2 is pending. And I will note too that green gas is one of the topics that we hope to have a discussion on today. Next slide, please. All right, so just an overview of track 2 and the process. I kind of want to start by saying that, we do want this to be a collaborative process. I know these kind of remote meetings make open discussion a little more challenging, but I don't see this as a process where it's going to be a bunch of staff presentations, parties listening and asking questions. I do want to encourage stakeholders to come forward with ideas and comments to really help shape this process. So this initial meeting today is to establish the process and topics for future collaborative meetings. The initial list is based off of the directives from those 3 commission orders I just mentioned, as well as the comments we received from stakeholders in advance of this meeting. All of these collaborative meetings will be publicly noticed in those 3 retail access proceedings. And, in the vein of having a true collaborative process here, staff will likely seek written comments from interested stakeholders to inform our discussions on specific topics prior to those targeted meetings. And also want to encourage the option for stakeholders to provide presentations. Again, I don't think this should be just a staff-driven process. I think the industry really has some information to offer here. More on stakeholder presentations, I think, at the end of the slide deck, when we talk about next steps. But just, I think we'll either be looking for maybe volunteers who are interested in speaking and doing a presentation on individual topics, or we may also reach out to individual stakeholders and ask that they provide a presentation. And then ultimately, I think, the reason we're here is to examine potential changes to the Commission's existing rules with proposals to change those rules to come before the Commission for a determination. So before I go on, I do just want to remind folks, a number of folks have joined since I was doing the background here. Everyone is muted upon entry. In order to ask a question or make a comment, we ask that you use the raise hand function, which is a small button in the bottom right of your screen. When you hit that button, you'll show up on a list here that the panelists can see. You'll be called on, unmuted to make your comment. And then afterward, just ask that you remember to lower your hand by hitting the button again, so that we can keep track of who hasn't been called on yet. I think we're ready for the next slide, Robin. So these are the topics that staff proposes to address today. I think the big one is consideration of additional energy-related value-added products and services. And I specifically note green gas products is probably one of the first ones that the industry has expressed interest in, and that we would likely tackle definitely in this meeting and probably in some of our initial subsequent meetings. Also, as directed in the September 2020 rehearing order, the definition of small non-residential customer, we'll have an introductory discussion on that. Utility provided price comparisons and cost itemizations. A lot of industry stakeholders submitted comments in advance of this meeting on that topic, as well as the integrated energy data resource that was directed to be established in the Commission's strategic use of energy-related data proceeding. Next slide. All right, so getting right into the energy-related value-added products and services. You know, I generally don't have to read directly off slides, but I think the Commission's directives are important enough here. So I'll just go through them here. You know, from the December 2019 order, staff and other interested stakeholders were directed to explore in track 2 of these proceedings which, if any, energy-related value-added products and services are most likely to benefit customers and advance the state's energy policy goals, which products and services can or should be offered to ESCOs, or in which are more appropriately offered by DER providers or distributed energy resource providers, and what rules, including pricing and disclosure requirements, should be applied to ESCO products, including such energy-related products and services. And with respect to pricing of these products, the Track 2 process should address this pricing issue by focusing on first determining how to identify energy-related value-added products and services that could be provided by an ESCO along with energy supply service, and second, ensuring that the pricing for those products are transparent. The Commission directed that the Track 2 process should then address whether ESCOs have shown sufficient willingness and ability to provide such products that the Commission should consider expanding the list of permissible value-added products and services. So let's go to the next slide. And just generally on this topic, these are some of the comments that we received. You know, parties are looking for a forward-looking process with a question as to how products and services will be evaluated and permitted. On that point, I think, you know, Track 2 is really where these additional products and services will be introduced and evaluated. And then, you know, they will be provided to the Commission as a recommendation that could take a number of forms for ultimate Commission determination. Parties comment that minimum standards should be set for products, and staff agrees with this. I see this as less of a one-off approval of individual companies offering one product or another, and more of a generic process to look at products that the industry can offer as a whole, with minimum standards set to offer such products. We had a specific question here about the Public Service Commission approving community solar as a value-added product for mass market customers, where the ESCO is the project sponsor. That's certainly it can be a topic for discussion, or another product, I should say, for approval. And if folks have others as we go through this, I think this is really going to be a process that's somewhat driven by the industry to come forward with thoughts and ideas, and then how to incorporate those new products into the existing rules in light of considerations, for example, around achieving state's clean energy goals. And then another comment here regarding the transparency in pricing for bundled products. Parties mentioned that there are ways to provide this information that can be developed in these proceedings that take into consideration the challenges of modifying the utility billing platform, which is a challenge that staff recognizes as well. So I do want to pause here. I will note that we are going to talk about green gas in the next few slides specifically, but just generally on the process for introducing new energy-related value-added products and services. I wanted to pause, see if folks had any questions, or comments, or suggestions. And again, for the benefit of those that have joined since I last said this, to make a comment or ask a question, you are asked to use the raise hand function at the bottom right of your screen. And I'll also note, again, for those that are joining by phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *3. Christy, it looks like we have call-in user 24 with their hand raised. I'll also ask everyone, when you're making a comment or asking a question, to please first identify yourself and who you're appearing on behalf of. So,
hi, my name is.
Go ahead.
My name is Julie Steemer. I'm an attorney with Steemer Hart LLP, and I'm appearing on on behalf of a few ESCOs. So my question is, with respect to IRVAs, if there's a package of bundled products, is it appropriate or would it be approved by the commission for an ESCO to offer one or more such products to a single customer? Or do they have to apply for permission to offer each as a separate IRVA?
I think so. If I understand your question, it's will they have to,
Say for instance, Tom,
yes,
and
go ahead.
Mr. Dwyer, it's a surge protector, or it's a hot water heater, or but they want it all, or they want one.
I see what you're saying. So this is in relation to like a home warranty product that was approved in that January 2021 order. So that product as a whole is kind of its own approved standalone product. And when staff reviews submissions, for, like contracts and proposed products for approval for consistency with the UBP and commission orders, staff is really looking for consistency with what the commission has already approved, specifically with respect to Agway in the December 2019 order, as well as in that January 2021 order.
Okay.
So when, we talk about, obviously there's different components to a home warranty, whether it's, includes a hot water heater or not, or your furnace or not. But we do see those as really kind of home warranty products that do have that kind of insurance-like coverage for these different appliances. I know the question has come up with respect to surge protection and whether or not that by itself could qualify as a home warranty product as approved by the commission. For staff's part, the thinking was that by itself would not, that's really a pretty limited product in comparison to the home warranty products that were approved by the commission. Does that answer your question?
That's more for, that answers my question, except for one, if you'll allow me kindly to ask one more question. The surge protection is more for renters because obviously renters don't care for, home heaters and things like that. They care for surge protection. So it's a difference between renters and owners.
Understood. And, it just maybe the fact that the home warranty type product approved by the commission might not be the most preferred product for renters for that reason. There's certainly, given the now 4 products that have been approved, not every product is going to be, beneficial to every customer segment. And I think that's just a practical reality. But, staff is looking in these Track 2 proceedings to try to identify additional and new value-added products and services that could generally provide value to mass market customers.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for the comment. So I do see we still have folks trickling in, and I'll probably say this a few more times. I want to remind folks of the process. We do want to have more of an open discussion and provide parties with the opportunity to make comments and suggestions. You can do that by using the raise hand function on the bottom right hand of your screen, and for those that are participating by phone, they can raise their hand by hitting *3. And I do ask that after you you make your comment or ask your question, that you then again lower your hand so that we can better keep track of who is still waiting to be addressed. So I see we have a couple hands raised here. Christy, can you go ahead and unmute Josh? I'm sorry if I messed your last name. Pasquarello?
That's pretty close. It's Pasquarello.
Okay. Well, I apologize
close
about
enough,
that.
though. It's a good first attempt there. So I'm calling from National Grid, and I'd be interested in hearing what other utilities have to say as well. But I think we have two potentially contradictory issues for the utilities. On the one hand, when it comes to these other value-added items, we'd have to probably figure out how to separate those from supply charges, which might be an issue for our billing systems if we're not set up to do that as yet. On the flip side of that, we wouldn't want charges, those value-added products necessarily rolled up into the supply charges, because we wouldn't want to pay POR on, say, insurance to help cover a water heater. We'd only expect to pay POR on the supply itself. So I just wanted to put that out there for consideration.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that is an issue that has recently kind of come up as we look at these the existing energy-related value-added products or services, and it's definitely a point that we'll need to consider.
Thank you.
I see we do have another call-in user with their hand raised. Number 56, go ahead.
Hi, this is Ms. Harrafeller. Good morning. I wanted to just make a comment following the discussion on the home warranty products that, you know, and thanks, Tom, I do realize there'll be a variety of products available for different customers, but just for clarification, there are HVAC products that are available for renters, or there are renters that are not necessarily in apartments or do have that equipment set up. So I just think it's important that we don't have any sort of broad understanding or limitation as to how a certain home warranty product might apply to a certain sector. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And I was just raising that, as a point that, yeah, one that maybe does only focus on surge protection, one that only focuses on insurance for like hot water heaters and furnaces, things like that, may not be as attractive to renters, but certainly don't want to generalize. I mean, all customers have varying situations and interest in different products. So we wouldn't be excluding it from any customer segment on that, on that basis. All right. And another comment here from Charlie Linello. Linello. Go ahead, Charlie.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, it's Charlie. I know. I had a follow-up to a question that was asked previously, and it was, or maybe it was just comments, and it was related to the products that were already approved by the commission. So there was the Agway product, and then there were, I believe, 4 petitions that were filed by various companies that were ultimately approved in the January 2021 order. And my recollection is that at least 2 of those petitions didn't actually specifically characterize the products that were going to be offered, but rather mentioned suites of products that had been offered in other jurisdictions and products that could potentially be offered. Maybe it was just one petition, but I believe that there was maybe a couple where the actual product that was going to be offered wasn't laid out in detail, and that there were a number of different types of home warranty products that were mentioned as something that could be bundled in an offering in the New York market. Is there more detail on the products that are offered pursuant to the approval of those petitions, or did the approval of those petitions ultimately afford those companies flexibility around what could be offered, because there was a lack of specificity in the type of products that would be offered?
Sure. So you're right that some of the petitions, or at least one of the petitions, did have kind of, I think several of them did provide sort of a suite of options that would be or could be included under such a home warranty product. But really those got more specific when the company actually then filed contracts for staff's approval. Again, staff reviews all the customer agreements for consistency with the uniform business practices and the commission's orders. So it's really, those contracts that really lay out exactly what the ESCO is going to offer customers under this home warranty product. And, I do know most of those contracts, if it are filed confidentially, so that might not be a whole lot of transparency for the rest of the industry. But if, ESCOs have questions about this, or just want to, maybe float some proposed products by staff, that's something that, we will provide parties the opportunity to do. We have already worked with a number of companies who proposed products to kind of make sure that they are consistent with what the commission has already approved. And again, we would continue to do that going forward.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And I guess one other comment. So there are a lot of assumptions made about what the commission intended with the rulings in these orders. There just has to be, by the very nature of the complexity of the market and the sort of high level of some of the rulings. And so it seems to me that in approving the ability for ESCOs to offer value-added products and services, that the commission would have considered the impact on POR, and if that there were any issues, the commission would have required some type of separation of those charges. In fact, the commission did talk about the transparency piece that you've got listed as the fourth bullet point here, and that's a perfect opportunity to also mention the impact on POR, but the commission made no ruling that these types of value-added services should be separated into commodity and non-commodity for purposes of determining what charges should be included in POR. So I guess I think it's kind of expanding the scope of what was to be considered in track 2 here by talking about how these charges should be treated with POR.
Understood. And I maybe just a little pushback on that. I understand. Yeah, I do want to try to keep the scope not necessarily narrow, but kind of on focus to what we're supposed to address here. But it does sort of tie into, how these products are offered, and as you mentioned, the transparency behind it. To the extent, it's an issue for the utilities, whether it's just an issue that needs to be addressed in breaking out ESCO products in an itemized fashion, as was discussed by the commission, or maybe the commission needs to direct tariff changes to allow things to be recovered that way. I do think that's an issue that we'll probably have to broach in these or in later proceedings. So good. We got more hands raised here. Let's go to Ron Lucas.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and yeah, I was going to actually ask the question that the fellow before me asked about I was intrigued by the National Grid comment about not having the ability to break out the charges and the POR program. So if ESCO, I mean, I think you can't avoid the issue as to whether if ESCOs do their own bill or ESCOs bill on behalf of utilities, that may change how things are broken out or identified. So I don't know how we can avoid that issue, or I just think it needs a little bit more in-depth discussion for later in the presentation. In other words, let's say ESCOs render their own bill separately or do the distribution charges. I think National Fuel has a program like that, a single retailer type program. So I think those issues may need to be discussed in that context.
Yep, and on that point, the commission did decline to adopt ESCO consolidated billing in its recent orders, but to the extent that might address other issues that we're trying to, or other potential hurdles we're trying to get over here, that's certainly something that we could give a little bit more thought to. But I will note that, it's not sort of blank slate, for lack of a better term. I mean, the commission has kind of evaluated that issue and raised some of its concerns. So it would really to advance that, to move the ball on that even further, we would have to address some of those concerns already raised by the commission.
So it's like a track 2A. Okay. All right. Thank you.
And let's see, I think next to raise their hand was Richard Berkeley. Go ahead, Richard.
Thanks, Tom, and good morning, everybody. First, I'd like to say that I agree with Ron that the POR issue will have to be discussed at some point, and thus I wish to add my support to National Grid's comments from earlier. The questions that I had to ask are two. First, how much is staff intending to evaluate a potential value-added product or service on how much it lowers the cost of energy to the customer, or how much it raises it? And then my second question is, are the ESCOs going to pay less than 100% of the cost of modifying the utility billing platform for more transparency?
So first question first. Actually, maybe I'll take your second question first. On the billing changes, I think that was something already directed, I know it was something already directed by the commission to be addressed. It directed staff in the utilities to start working on some of these changes that may be necessary to improve transparency. There was no directive to have ESCOs specifically fund those changes. So at least that wasn't my thinking, that's where we would go with this, but that is an interesting suggestion.
Let me jump in there for a second, Tom, which is that if somehow the ESCOs were not to pay for that expense and process, it would be an outlier against virtually all of retail in New York State, in the United States. I mean, the gas station doesn't charge its customers to change the color on its gas station signs. And it doesn't, when they used to have to add all the extra little taxes and whatnot on those signs, customers didn't pay for that. The company paid for it.
Understood. But I think also, these improvements on transparency are meant to have general consumer benefits. So again, I'll admit it's not something that I've given much thought of before this call right here, but it's an interesting point.
Please think about it. Thanks.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, could you remind me of your first question now?
The first question is, to what extent in evaluation of potential or submitted value-added products and services will staff be examining how much the product or service lowers the cost of energy to the consumer, or how much it raises it?
Absolutely, yes. Price it will be a very important factor. If you read any of those three recent commission orders I went over in the background section, price is key for a lot of these considerations and determining what products provide value to customers. The default rule, has been stated, is the guaranteed savings rule. though the commission has also authorized products that may be more expensive, but that provide additional value streams to the customers, like, for example, a fixed rate product or a home warranty product. So that's going to be one of the kind of the issues we grapple with every single one of these potential proposed products is how does price relate to the value to the customer?
Thanks. And I was concerned about how much that exemption might be broadened, and if it were going to be broadened all the way back to the 2015 order, which basically allowed ESCOs to charge whatever they wanted if they could assert that there was some value-added product or service that they were providing.
Right. I think we're going to be a little bit more measured than we were, several years ago, as far as ensuring that, we have a defined list of eligible products now. And in order to expand them, I think what the commission is looking for is a clear identification of value to the customer, and again, transparency to the customer in offering these products.
Thanks, Tom.
I do just want to know, remind folks to please lower your hand if your comment has already been addressed. I understand some of you may still have comments. I see a couple folks with their hand raised, like Natara. Let's go to call-in user 56. Did you have another comment, or was your hand still raised from earlier? Perhaps raised from earlier. Let's go back and Ron Lucas, your hand is also still raised. Did you have another comment? Oh, it just went down. Scratch that. All right, just pausing for a second. Another comment here from Jeff Donnelly. Christy, can you go ahead and unmute Jeff?
Thank you, Christy, Tom. So I just wanted to make more of a general point in relation to the POR discussion, and just make sure everybody's cognizant that similar types of product offerings on the green and value add have been offered for several years by ESCOs. So it's not anything that's new. It's been covered under POR for years and years at this point. So I think the POR discussion is something separate from what we're discussing with these product offerings.
Yeah, that is a fair point, and that was one of the first points I made when this issue was raised probably about a month or so ago, was that, well, geez, to some extent, there's already these bundled products that are offered.
Right. Yeah, like I can't speak for other ESCOs, but at least from Family Energy's position, we've offered similar type of green products for, over 10 years now. And, this POR issue, I don't think is specific to this track proceeding, and is really more of a general discussion. And that I don't think we should be taking advantage of the fact that this track proceeding is talking about value add to use it to discuss breaking out which components of the product offering should be covered by POR and shouldn't. I think that's a much more broader discussion that's actually separate from this track proceeding.
Yep. Point taken. Thank you. Let's see. We have Katie O'Hare with a question or comment. Go ahead, Katie.
Thank you. So I apologize. I joined this meeting late due to technical difficulties, but I just wanted to jump in on the PRR issue. UIU does think it should be addressed in this case. I think there's broad commission jurisdiction, as the Court of Appeals made clear, so the PSC needs to make sure all ESCO products are just and reasonable. And the PRO issue is something that should be addressed in this case, and we'll also be looking closely at any proposals for products, even if it's products that have been approved before, like the home warranty. I think it's still open for us to discuss in this case and make sure that it is appropriate and consumers are receiving a value from that product. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. And Richard Berkeley with another comment. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, and thank you, Tom. I just wanted to reemphasize that POR is something that can, under the Commission's jurisdiction, be discussed in this set of meetings, and should, as far as pulp is concerned, allowing the cost of IRVAs, if such things are approved in larger numbers, or even the ones that exist now, in the POR is essentially forcing ratepayers and the utilities to pay insurance on products that are offered by the ESCOs because it insures them against loss. And I don't think that's an appropriate use of ratepayer money. So that's why I think this should be discussed here, and there should be a fairly clear set of standards for what can and should be allowed in the POR, which quite honestly, as I'm sure every ESCO on the phone knows, Pulp thinks is set far too high and should go away anyway. But for the time being, we should be analyzing it and finding out what's going into it, because creating more obscured pricing, that is to take away the transparency of the POR such that it exists now, is not a good direction for this to go.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'll just note, well, first on the jurisdictional issue, I think it's probably hopefully obvious that the commission can certainly address POR for the utilities, the purchase of receivable programs for the retail access program. And for my part, I did see it as having some relevance in this proceeding. If you'll remember, even aside from the issues we've discussed today, the December 2019 order addressed the potential to have individual ESCO POR rates, and it directed the utilities to begin tracking ESCO uncollectible rates. So, it wasn't something I had teed up for today's meeting, but it is something I think, as, the utilities collect more data on uncollectible rates for individual ESCOs, it might make sense to have some modifications to the POR rules to address the concerns raised by the commission in the December 2019 order. All right, so just again, a quick reminder, if you've already had your comment either made or your question addressed, please remember to lower your hand. If you're a call-in user, you can do so by hitting *3 again. And if you're on your computer, you can just click the raise hand icon again. So with that, I think I don't see, well, let's see. Call-in user 56, I believe that's Natara is still on there. Natara, did you have another comment?
I did, thank you, Tom. I just, without making specific comment to what is or is not included in POR, I just want to stress how, to the extent that the commission has approved certain products or has already permitted ESCOs or particular ESCOs to offer certain products, it's really important that there's, that those ESCOs can rely on the commission's determination and that those products are not, once approved, again put under scrutiny, because the ESCOs need consistency in the marketplace and the ability to rely on commission ruling or staff determination in order to offer products over the longer term for the sake of their continuity of their business. As it is, there's already been some shuffle on surge products that had been approved, and then that approval was subsequently rescinded, and it's extraordinarily disruptive for ESCOs that are trying and investing in continuing to serve customers in New York, within the limitations set forth by the commission. So, I do appreciate the issues raised by Pulp and by UIU, and I'm not commenting specifically on the POR, so please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. It's incredibly important that those same entities take into account the effect that pulling products from the marketplace or the lack of regulatory certainty has on both ratepayers and the industry as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks, Natara. And another comment, call-in user 24.
Yeah, hi, it's Julie Steemer. I just wanted to second what Natara said, because there have been instances where I have seen disparate treatment of ESCOs, and I want to reinforce what Natara said. I respect her immensely, and it's very important for
Oh, did we lose you, Julie?
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay, I got a weird message. But I know I respect OHara's judgment immensely, and it's very important, and I want to reiterate what she said. It's that everybody's treated the same, and there's you know, ESCOs know what they're getting into when they're getting into it, and when they're filing petitions and when they're doing this or that, that they know that there's going to be non-disparate treatment.
Yes, thank you. And I will just, hopefully it goes without saying, but I will just note that, I mean, staff's goal is always consistency with all companies. I mean, we have a staff team that works on all these retail access issues. We are very, I apologize for interrupting you. We are very appreciative of the service that the staff provides for the ESCOs. And I think I speak on behalf of OHara as well, but it's something that the ESCOs are really like confused about, because it appears to them that there has been disparate treatment. So that's all I'm trying to add to the conversation. Understood, and that's what I was just about to know. I mean, these new rules directed by the commission, it's, you know, to some extent staff's working with their implementation in the same way that the ESCOs are. There is a bit of some growing pains in working through these, and, you know, to the extent there, if there are inconsistent treatment with product approvals, you know, that has been very short in nature. Staff has been trying to address issues as they come up, and we will continue to do so. Again, the goal is always consistency across the board, and for their part, I feel that staff really does go out of their way to be available and responsive to companies to help address concerns and questions, and we appreciate the feedback when there is an apparent mistake or something like that, so that we can all together make sure that we're on the right track with compliance with these new orders.
I will say on my behalf, like Robin and Kathleen and Christy are wonderful. So, and you too.
Well, staff, thanks.
And now I'm going to turn myself off.
All right, great. All right, so great discussion. I think maybe now we'll move on to the next slide here. One of the topics that was specifically brought up with respect to energy-related value-added products or services was green gas products. I'm not going to go through all the Commission's quotes here, but this was just some language from the January 2021 order. It directed that, you know, as I mentioned, it did not adopt a generic green gas product to be offered by the industry, but directed that this issue be addressed in track 2. The Commission wanted parties to get together in a collaborative setting to permit a better understanding of green gas proposals and to address concerns related to the provision of value to customers, as well as, you know, the issue around how do these green gas proposals fit into New York's aggressive clean energy goals. In one of the specific points that you'll see on the third bullet there, the Commission suggested that interested stakeholders address the, you know, the possibility that a potential unintended consequence of ESCOs providing green gas products is that customers will be inclined to either consume more natural gas or, relatedly, reduce their use of natural gas over time less than they would otherwise had the commodity not been included as part of a green gas bundle. Again, this kind of goes towards the state's clean energy goals and kind of the shifting policy around natural gas at the time. That is not an exhaustive list of issues to be addressed in relation to green gas, but it was just one that was specifically identified by the commission and I thought worthwhile bringing up here. Let's go to the next slide, Robin. Robin, if you're there, let's go to the next, there we go. So this is just kind of a summary of the green gas proposals that were submitted last year. Generally, they fell into two categories, a carbon offset product or a REC product. The carbon offset product would offset a percentage of the customer's natural gas usage by purchasing carbon allowances from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. And the amount of RGGI allowances that needed to be purchased for the customer would be determined by multiplying a customer's natural gas consumption by 117 to identify the pounds of carbon dioxide being produced by the customer's natural gas usage. The second type of product, REC products, generally it was a proposal to offset a customer's natural gas usage by purchasing and retiring renewable energy certificates, or RECs, or making alternative compliance payments, or ACPs, to NYSERDA. A key part of these products is that it requires a conversion of decatherms of natural gas to megawatt hours of electricity. As folks may or may not know, the renewable energy certificates are really tied to the electric sector, and one REC equals 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. Let's go to the next slide, Robin. So these are some of the comments, questions, concerns that we received from stakeholders in advance of this meeting. First comment here is someone said there should be a minimum standard for all green gas products, and that approval of individual ESCO products should only take place if they meet that minimum threshold. I think that's something staff completely agrees with. As I mentioned earlier, the intention here is not to evaluate individual ESCO's one-off value-added products, but to instead look at products on a generic basis that could be approved by the commission and offered by the industry as a whole. And that's in line with the next comment as well, that if one ESCO receives approval for a particular product, other ESCOs should also get approval for a similar product. And again, that's not specific to green gas. I think that would apply across the board to any energy-related value-added products being considered in Track 2. Some parties commented, this appears to be specifically with respect to the REC offset program or products, that one path can be to electrify the gas on an energy equivalent basis and then quote unquote green it with RECs. And along those lines, as I noted, a conversion process needs to be established on that conversion from natural gas to electricity. And to me, that's a point that I don't know if folks on the phone have any thoughts on that, but I would be interested in discussing both the kind of the conversion or the calculations that are used for the carbon offset products as well as the REC products. Another issue to consider with the REC products is short-term REC availability. We also have a comment here that utilities should not offer competing green gas or renewable natural gas products. That we need tracking system/standards for those carbon offset products using RGGI allowances or some other carbon offsets. And all of this, as I mentioned a couple slides ago, really needs to be considered in light of the Commission's clean energy goals and the desire to reduce reliance on fossil fuels. And then, as I briefly alluded to, and we're probably going to talk about at various points throughout this Track 2 process, is how are these evaluated and ultimately put before the commission. You know, staff is open to suggestions. I think one of the kind of the clearer paths for commission consideration I see is through stakeholder or collaborative reports, whether filed by staff, whether filed by a group of industry folks. You know, I see that as a preferred approach over, again, individual petitions. So I know that there's probably a number of folks that have comments on this. I think I'd like to pause here and start going through some of those comments. It looks like Angela Schur has her hand raised.
Yes,
Go ahead,
hi. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So Green Mountain is one of our brands. I'm from NRG. One of our brands is Green Mountain. It's a renewable brand, 100% renewable. We've been offering electricity for years, 100% renewable. We actually started offering green gas because electric. What can we do on the gas side that can help the environment and reduce our emissions and all that. So with regard to your bullet point on the question as to whether or not this would encourage customers to use more gas or to basically not reduce the reliance on fossil fuels, we found actually the opposite. Like customers, they already have gas and they're looking to do something about it. So that's kind of like, how can they help the environment, even though they are using gas? How can they still help the environment? So, I just wanted to just point that out, that we've actually seen the opposite, and we're happy to present on a future call on this topic because we have been offering a green gas product for many years in New York.
Great, thank you, Angela, for your comment and for that offer. I think it's probably likely staff will take you up on that. As I'm going to mention later in the slide deck, I do see green gas as, at least given the feedback we've received from the industry, as one of the kind of the first issues to be addressed in Track 2. And at least for staff's part, I would propose that maybe our next collaborative meeting focus exclusively on green gas. So that perhaps might be an opportunity for the Green Mountain companies to provide a presentation on that. Any other questions or comments on green gas? Yes, I see Ron Lucas. Go ahead, Ron.
Yes, I'd like just to add to what Angela said. And I think if you really, just from a common sense viewpoint, if customers are paying more for the product, they generally don't use more if they're paying more. It's kind of like a inverse price elasticity thing or something. So I think that's something to be considered with, which I think supports what Angela's Green Mountain's results are. So if you're voluntarily paying more, it usually doesn't result in increased consumption. So I think that's something to put in perspective or talk about.
Fair point. Thank you, Ron. And I will just note, it's not just, an increase in consumption, but it says maybe the state moves more towards electrification. If providing these sort of greener options for natural gas would, maybe slow that transition or discourage, maybe discourage isn't the right word, but, prevent a customer from reducing natural gas usage as much as they would have absent a green gas product. But the point is well taken, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Next, I see Katie O'Hare. Go ahead, Katie.
Thank you. This is Katie O'Hare from UIU. I appreciate the slide. I'll have to take this back to UIU for further consideration, but I just want to make sure I understand the process. So would this be a stakeholder report, then parties file individual comments just on the green gas issue, or is this going to be a stakeholder report once all of the Track 2 issues have been considered?
Good question. I think, we would probably address these on individual basis. We could be having a number of meetings on a number of issues regarding, within the Track 2 process. And you know, for my part, I don't know if it makes sense to wait until we've sort of resolved everything to propose anything to the commission. I see there are potentially some, you know, some issues that could be addressed more in the near term that there's already been some thinking on that could probably go off. Like, for example, green gas could be its own stakeholder report or proposal to the commission while we still consider, you know, the next topic here, the definition of small non-residential customers. I don't think we'll be waiting for everything in track 2 to be addressed to file one report. I think these would be individual topics. And then just on the process, I think you got it right when you said, you know, it would be a report that would be filed publicly, notice an opportunity to comment, and then a determination by the commission.
Okay, that's a helpful clarification. I'll have to take that back. I guess just the other thing that I've been thinking of is it's going to be really important for UAE to review data on these products and understand what the value proposition is to consumers. So I think discovery would be helpful to establish that so parties can ask questions and just make sure we fully understand these products that are being proposed.
Understood. I will note that I don't expect us to go into like kind of a full-blown evidentiary process like we did you know, several years ago. There won't be an ALJ assigned to this this track 2 collaborative process. So I'll have to, I guess, kind of take that back and determine what we can or should do with respect to discovery. But to the extent, you know, proposals are filed for commission consideration, I think those would need to be pretty transparent and clear for not only the commission, but for all interested stakeholders to understand, you know, as you mentioned, what the value proposition is and what the, you know, everything from the calculations or what the process is to offer these types of products.
Okay, I'll take that back. Thank you.
All right, and then I'll just make another quick reminder to folks to please remember to lower your hand if your comment has already been addressed. Next, I see Kevin Blake has his hand raised. Go ahead, Kevin. Are you there, Kevin? Maybe he's having some technical difficulty. Let's just pause on Kevin for now. Let's go to Jennifer McCabe. Go ahead, Jennifer. Oh, actually, Jennifer is still muted. There we go.
Hi, I just wanted to know if you could please show the slide again regarding the upcoming stakeholder meetings before the end of the meeting.
Oh, yes, we have a slide on next steps at the end of this presentation.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, well, actually, it looks like Kevin had lowered his hand. Does anyone else have any comments or questions on green gas before we move on? I see Ron Lucas has his hand raised again.
Yes,
go ahead, Ron.
just quickly, when we submitted our comments, we also indicated that we believe CCA should be held to the same standard as ESCOs for these products, that whatever's approved. So I know that was an issue in the CCA case, and probably applies here too. Whatever rules are set for providing a product, community choice aggregation groups probably should follow the same rules. At least that's our position. So I think that should be discussed somewhere in the case.
Great, thank you, Ron. And we have another call-in user, call-in user 63. Go ahead.
Hi, it's OHara. I wanted to ask Tom if the commission is coordinating or taking into account at all the way in which the green gas products may help meet the state's standards that the state set for reducing gas emissions, which I believe the Department of Environmental Conservation is charged with implementing?
Oh, yes, I mean, certainly that's a key consideration as part of these green gas products, how they will help us achieve, or at least how they can be justified as consistent with our clean energy programs, including those focused on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions.
So,
Go ahead, Natara.
I think I'm still, okay, sorry, I wasn't sure if I was still unmuted. So is there a department or division within the Department of Environmental Conservation that staff has started working with, or that you could possibly recommend that we could reach out to? Because I do think that would really facilitate the coordination between the agencies, and the ESCOs could be very beneficial.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. That's something staff will have to follow up on, but I do see that coordination as potentially bearing fruit. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, so I did just want to, in fact, Robin, could we go back one slide? I would like to, and if folks don't have any insight on the phone here today, that's fine. Again, we will be having a subsequent meeting on green gas specifically. But I just was wondering if anyone had any thoughts around really the bottom two bullets regarding the conversion process for both REC products and really the calculation process for carbon offsets. Again, if no one has any comments to make here today, that's fine. But that at least strikes me as one of the first hurdles to really address is how do we, track these types of REC or offset products, excuse me. All right, Jeff Donnelly. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, sure, Tom. I'm just talking out loud here for the purpose of productivity, but tracking of the carbon offset products. We've been offering this type of product for several years, and we track it internally and we audit it internally. It could simply just be an annual reporting requirement to commission staff on how many customers are on that product, and confirming and validating the proper amount of purchased carbon offsets.
Thank you for that. Actually, though, my comment was a little bit more specific, not as to just how the commission's tracking the product, but really about the calculation itself. For example, there's a lot of the products proposed to multiply a customer's natural gas consumption by 117 to identify the pounds of CO2 being produced by the customer. And, I'm not an expert on, carbon dioxide emissions and things like that. I'm wondering, if that's the right calculation, where that calculation came from. Really less about tracking the product as a whole and more about tracking that the appropriate number of allowances, for example, were purchased in relation to the customer's gas usage. And again, not putting Jeff or anyone specific on the spot, but just general, for discussion purposes, I see that as an issue to be addressed. All right, seeing no hands raised, I think we can move on for the time being. But food for thought as, again, subsequent meetings that specifically address green gas products, I think that's an issue we will need to tackle. Actually, I see we do have a couple of hands raised. So before I go on to the next topic, let's go to Jennifer McCabe.
Hi, thank you. So I heard that the New York Power Authority is going to be conducting a pilot project for injecting some green hydrogen into natural gas. And I'm just wondering if the commission you think the commission is going to consider green hydrogen when and the future of green hydrogen in evaluating these green gas products.
Great point. And you actually reminded me of another point I wanted to make. To answer your question, I do think, these alternative options are on the table. The products generally that we saw were focused on still providing the customer with natural gas, but sort of just offsetting that usage through other mechanisms. One of the things that we really didn't see a ton of is proposals to specifically provide customers with renewable natural gas or an alternative, quote unquote, greener or cleaner gas product. So I do think that, the renewable hydrogen is on the table. I know that there's still like some technology, concerns that need to be addressed, I think, and that's kind of lends itself to the pilot. But yes, I think those types of options are on the table.
Well, as a follow-up question, though, the main reason I'm thinking about this is because in New Jersey, there are some gas utilities who are already talking about injecting green hydrogen into the gas distribution system. And if that started happening in New York, would you think that has any impact on the value of a green gas product if the distribution system already has green hydrogen in it?
Yes, it very well might. I mean, again, potentially widespread use of a green hydrogen product may look more appealing in relation to our clean energy goals than a product that is still based on the provision of natural gas with carbon offsets or the like. And I'm just speaking for myself. I mean, that's a bit of speculation here, our discussion here today, but that is certainly a consideration.
Thank you.
All right, I also see Amanda Trinzi with her hand raised. Go ahead, Amanda.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Well, how are you?
Good. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties getting into the meeting this morning, so I was late. So apologies if you already addressed this question. Are you going to make this presentation available following the meeting?
Absolutely. The meeting is being recorded, so we're going to provide the presentation and the meeting recording at some point after the meeting, probably early next week.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Sure thing. And I do see, I'm just kind of keeping an eye on the attendee list. It's fluctuated up and down, and for folks that may have joined late, I'll just go through one more time a reminder of how to comment or ask questions. If you're participating on your computer, you're asked to use the raise hand function, which is a small button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. When staff sees your hand raised, we'll call on you, unmute you, allow you to provide your comment. And then for folks on the phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *3. We do ask that folks, once you're done making your comment or your question has been addressed, to then lower your hand by, again, hitting the raise hand function on your computer, or again, hitting *3. And along those lines, Jennifer McCabe, your hand is up. Did you have another comment, or was that just from earlier?
Oh, I apologize. I didn't know how to unraise my hand on this.
Same button. No worries.
Okay.
Anything else on green gas before we move on? All right, Robin, why don't we advance oh, wait, almost got there. Richard Berkeley, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that, Tom.
No worries.
I guess my question, in light of the commission having some interest in arriving at a definitive definition of what green gas is and what a green gas product might be, where are any, and let me back up, are there any outside sources, for example, other states, federal EPA, federal EIA, Energy Department, whatever, from which staff is going to be proposing definitions for these two concepts that appear to be fairly important if we're going to take them next in the meeting process?
So Richard, you broke up a little bit there. Were you asking if there are similar definitions or things that are available either in other jurisdictions or even in New York that have already been adopted, like by specific agencies?
Yeah, since this is an issue that gets discussed in rate cases, and there doesn't appear to be at least in litigation staff for rate cases and the environmentalists that are on, there doesn't appear to be any agreed upon definition in New York State at this point.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a potential outcome of this process could be establishment of such a definition. If there are other definitions in other jurisdictions that either might be a good starting point or might be, you know, applicable to the programs we're looking for here in New York, staff would be very interested in stakeholders sharing those. I know we'll be doing our own research, but again, in the vein of collaborative solutions here, we're all ears if there are other things that you think we should be considering.
Thanks. Last question. Since staff was staffing all of the Climate Action Committee working groups, were there any proposals from any of the working groups about what green gas might be defined as consistent with the CLCPA?
Myself, I have not been involved in those working groups, so I can't say sitting here today what those what those discussions were if this issue, the definition of green gas, was broached. But that's certainly something I can follow up on, and I will do so.
Thanks. I mean, it just struck me that it might be premature to try and create a pathway for green gas products to be offered under a definition arrived at here in advance of whatever the Climate Action Council is going to say in its report next year. And I'll stop there.
Point taken. Thank you for that. That's a good one. All right, last call for green gas comments. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next topic. And why don't we go ahead a couple slides, Robin? So the next topic that staff had slated for an introductory discussion today was the definition of small non-residential customers. So these customers are defined as non-demand metered electric customers, and for gas customers, they're defined as those using less than or equal to 750 decatherms per year. The September 2020 rehearing order directed that Track 2 further consider whether this definition that would bring small non-residential customers into the category of mass market customers that are subject to greater consumer protections best balances consumer interests. Directed that it specifically be addressed in Track 2 of the proceedings with a revised definition proposed to the Commission as appropriate. Next slide, Robin. So we did get a number of questions and comments and the like from stakeholders in advance of this meeting. I'll go through several of them now. They mentioned that we must thoroughly examine the concept that the amount of commodity used by a small non-residential customer correlates to the level of attention dedicated to investigating ways to reduce usage or hedge costs associated with a commodity. This commenter notes that if a volumetric level must be used for gas customers, the question is, what is that correct level so that customers who want to shop are not prevented from doing so? We also had a comment that, regarding this definition of what constitutes a small non-residential gas customer, this commenter proposes mirroring the Pennsylvania definition for small non-residential gas customer as a business whose annual gas consumption does not exceed 300 MCF. Another person commented, and I think we got a couple of these comments indicating that the threshold of 750 decatherms a year is too high, and that they propose maybe 400 decatherms per year is a more appropriate amount. Also, they recognize, they note that this has caused confusion for customers who are considered mass market for one commodity, but not for the other. Just quickly on that point, I will note that the commission recognized that as a outcome of this rule, that this determination of whether or not a customer's mass market is done on a commodity basis. So there is the potential that a customer may be considered mass market for one commodity and not the other. Regarding electric customers, we had a comment that all lighting, including like street lighting, traffic lighting, private area lighting should be exempt from this, and that these accounts should not be prevented from full participation in the market solely because they are they have a non-demand meter. In a similar vein, we had a comment that meter type is not the best determinant by which to separate small and large commercial customers, that the threshold, they recommend that the threshold for electric demand billing varies somewhat by utility, and that this makes the administration of this definition uneven and unnecessarily complicated. And they believe that a usage-based metric like that used for gas customers would be better to capture this distinction. And then a comment, generally that I spoke to earlier, that if a customer is not designated small non-residential electric customer, then they should also not be designated a small non-residential gas customer, and vice versa. Again, the commission did recognize that the definition is specific to commodity, and that it could be small, or it could be mass market for one commodity and not the other. I think we did have another slide on questions from this one. Yes. So I do see we have some hands raised. I will be getting to those just a second. I do want to go through these other points. Regarding usage history, this is a point I think is really key to discuss here. They mentioned for natural gas customers that do not have 12 months of historical usage, such accounts should be exempt from essentially the product restriction requirements until such account has 12 months of usage data and a determination can be made as to its annual usage. And kind of relatedly to usage history, COVID and potential future issues will need to be addressed. For instance, the most recent 12 months are not necessarily reflective of customers' normal usage. Where instances of shutdowns, construction, things like that, usage might be potentially lower or higher in the past, given the issues of COVID over the past year, than they would otherwise be. And then a somewhat related note, not so much on small non-residential customers, but regarding residential customers, this is a point that was raised by a few stakeholders, noting that farms, churches, and schools, etc., should be exempt from these additional consumer protections, even though they are classified as residential under the utility service classes, so long as they would not otherwise be defined as small non-residential under that definition. This commenter notes that the definitional class for such customers is not based on their load characteristics or their sophistication. I do see this as probably a ripe issue to take up in relation to the definition of small non-residential customer. I'll note that these entities, like churches, for example, have been classified as residential for rate treatment, and there's reasons behind that. Whether or not carrying that residential classification over to these retail access consumer protections makes sense is something that we should address here. So at this point, I think I'll stop and we'll go to some comments from the industry. I see here we have Jeff Donnelly with his hand raised. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Tom. If we could just go back to the previous slide, that'd be appreciated.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to make some comments in relation to the threshold definitions and whatnot. So at least from family's position, We operate in other states with other entities, and the gas threshold to us appears to be reasonable under the circumstances, but we do agree that the electricity definition should be volumetric and not based on the meter classification. That would also be consistent with other commission rules in the other states, and it does add for better understanding and transparency for the customer and for the ESCO when trying to determine what classification they fall under. And Tom, to your point, that I feel that would also address the issue on the church's classification if the electricity had a threshold applied to it rather than demand meter status.
Great, thank you for that, Jeff. Let's see, Richard Berkeley also has his hand raised. Go ahead, Richard.
Oh, sorry, Tom. Actually, I hadn't unraised it from the last time, but I do have a question. So I'll jump in. Thanks. So there is a definition of small non-residential customers that arises from the Parker-Richardson Moratorium Act, which is a business no larger than 25 employees. And that may or may not be valuable for adoption here, but if staff and the ESCO industry wish to propose something else, I think there needs to be some consideration of the fact that there is already an existing legal standard that the department and commission are required to follow.
Good point, Richard. Thank you. All right, several hands raised now. Let's go to Ron Lucas. Just one moment. We unmute Ron.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ron.
I'm going to have to disagree with Jeff. I don't think the gas threshold is reasonable. I think if you look at how that was set, it was many years ago when we were first talking about this, and a lot of the utilities didn't want to do the work to separate out small from large. They were going to use their service classification definitions, and that would have captured all the commercial and industrial customers. So we proposed, when I was at Great Eastern, we had proposed just as a stopgap at that time, 750. We didn't do a lot of analysis, but it was adopted if you look in the orders. Since then, I think, I guess it was Richard who said something about the 25 employees. That's probably too high as number of employees, but nobody's really attempted, and I don't know if it's possible, to correlate sophistication to usage. It's kind of like a practical definition that people are trying to do. So I don't know, maybe we need to have more discussion about that. I tried to introduce a concept of getting a commercial loan in the reset case, but it was never commented on as a threshold. There may be alternate thresholds to use as to what delineates what a sophisticated customer is versus not, and not just simply usage. So I think it's something, if we can, we should explore it. But I think bottom line is the 750 we feel is too high. We like Pennsylvania's definition, but we can have further discussion about that. And I have one other comment, which I haven't really thought 100% through, but let me ask a question, Tom. Is a smart meter a demand meter? Is that considered a demand meter or not? I know I'm not looking to open the door for all the residential customers, but there's a lot of work being done now to control, especially on the gas side, for peak load reductions and controlling usages. And that's probably a good space for ESCOs to get involved in. Is a smart meter a demand meter, even an electric side? I don't know if they have them on gas.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have an answer for you today, but to the extent, as we shift this definition potentially, whether to or from, meter type being a determining factor, we will certainly need to consider the penetration of smart meters throughout the state as that becomes more prevalent.
Yes, yes, thank you. And I just want to reiterate that the 750 there was really no due diligence done in that number, except as a practical number. So they weren't using service classification definitions as the threshold, which would have captured all the commercial and industrial customers. So that's my comments.
And I just want to, kind of echo your points about the alternative means to determine a customer's sophistication. I think that analysis is really something we need to endeavor to undertake in this proceeding, or track 2 of this proceeding. I do see, given this was a specific directive by the commission, as this definition of small non-residential customers probably warranting its own stakeholder meeting. And if it's, if it's just changing the thresholds or coming up with a new threshold, I think that's on the table here. And like you said, it really comes down to reevaluating that correlation between usage or some other metric and sophistication. All right, so we have some other hands raised here. Let's go to calling user 63. I believe that's Natara. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, it's Natara. Thank you, Tom. I want. You know what, Tom? I'm gonna skip my turn right now because I have to take care of my son. I'm sorry.
No worries. Had a lot of that this past year or so. Understood. Let's move on to Jeff Donnelly, who has his hand raised.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Todd. Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry, thanks. Yeah, just in relation to Richard's comment, he made a very good point. My only concern about that is basing it on an employee count is, on a practical perspective, is basically impossible for DPS staff to enforce. And it's next to impossible for an ESCO to confirm that outside of the customer signing the contract, affirming such on the contract itself. So it has its disadvantages, which I believe are outweigh the advantages of following consistency with that type of definition. And we should really be focusing just on a volumetric amount. That makes it more transparent and much easier for DPS staff to enforce and oversee as well.
Yeah, fair point. And I will note just kind of my off the cuff thinking here is that, while I don't want to foreclose any potential metrics here, I would think that they would at least be, energy related metrics. Richard does raise a good point about the Act's definition related to the number of employees, but I think for the Commission's oversight of these retail access programs, it makes sense to me, at least sitting here today, that whatever metrics we land on, if we decide to change this definition, would still be energy related.
Good point. Yeah.
All right, let's keep moving along here. Calling user 10 with their hand raised. Go ahead. I realize you might not know that you're calling user 10, but
I'm going to guess that this is Dave Lundeen from Morabito. I'm going to guess I'm calling user 10.
You got it. Go ahead, Dave.
Hi, Tom. I want to add on to Jeff Donnelly's and Ron Lucas's comments there, in that we agree that the most enforceable and logical way to do this, lacking the rate class distinction that we have on the electric side, which is a sharp and a clean break, lacking that kind of definitive rate classifications on the gas side, we believe it should be volumetric. We also favor the Pennsylvania and sizing, and the other proposals have been submitted previously that are closer to 300 or 400 decatherms, and I think we can support that with an energy value comparison to the size of the electric accounts that are considered mass market. So having said that, I'd be willing to put together a white paper for submittal through the case docket that hits on 3 points. One, resizing the gas threshold to a different number based on a comparison to the same energy values for electricity mass market customers and a few other criteria for review by all the ESCOs and other stakeholders. And part B, redefining residential customer in accordance with other previous definitions that the commission has applied in previous orders and related orders under 16 NYCRR Part 11, which does a really good job of defining what a true residential customer is, regardless of how classified by the utilities rate class. It gives a fairly succinct definition of what a true residential customer is. So I think we could put forward that as a suggestion for what a residential customer definition is. And then Part C of the white paper would be addressing the issues of decreased usage strictly as a result of COVID-19 issues, with a simple test that could be applied that I think would be enforceable and would help avoid, classifying customers incorrectly for this 1 year period as we come out of the pandemic. So in summary, Tom, that would be a white paper that I'd be happy to propose and submit through the docket for comment on the threshold, 750, supporting moving that to 300, between 300 and 400. Part B, using the definition from New York Code of Regulations, Part 16 for residential customers, and Part C, proposing a simple test for categorizing COVID-19 impact. So those are my thoughts.
Great, thank you, David, for that. I think before we get to a white paper, as I did mention, I expect we'll have a meeting probably focused just on this. And I think if you have some insight on, a potential path forward, we might look to you to maybe do a presentation at that stakeholder meeting so that we could have kind of a full discussion on some of these issues. At the end of it.
Great. I agree with you that we need to separate the issues, because some of these are certainly much will require much more involvement. The item involving COVID-19 impact is probably something we'd like to act on sooner rather than later. So I'd be happy to, Tom. Thanks.
Great. You'll note that at the I don't think I have your contact information, but at the end of this slide deck, we're going to put staff's contact information. If you would, please feel free to reach out to share your thoughts after this meeting, and that way we can coordinate, potential discussions for future meetings.
Thank you.
All right, we have another call-in user 29. It's a 518 number beginning in 469.
Hi, this is Bill Yates. Can you hear me?
Yes, Bill, go ahead.
Hi, Tom. How are you today? I think I'm going to follow up on Richard's concerns here, and perhaps express that I think the need to develop some both qualitative and quantitative determinants of what constitutes a sophisticated customer versus a non-sophisticated customer for purposes of defining the small business customer really needs special consideration here. We participate in rate cases, in which we analyze the residential and small business class all the time, and we see volumetric levels of some of the class as being much higher than one would ever expect from a strictly residential customer, and that's because the PSL allows for both true residential type users and also organizations such as nonprofit organizations, farms, churches, and many other types of differing kinds of organizations to be included in the class, and some of the usage levels in these for these customers are very high, and yet those customers are not sophisticated, in the way that a typical business would be. So I think that, you know, this is not going to be something that can be determined strictly by a volumetric type of criterion. We will need to have probably a much more careful and, if necessary, you know, laborious evaluation of what the level of sophistication of these customers is. You know, presently we are going through very detailed considerations in rate cases about simply adjusting tail block rates for gas by very, very nominal levels, just so that we can start to flatten out some of the volumetric pricing. And it's, you know, it's a very, very difficult analysis because there are customers that are going to be significantly harmed who are high usage and not sophisticated customers. So I can't emphasize enough that Pulp believes that this topic does require a very detailed analysis, a special session of the working group just to deal with it, and maybe even more than one, because this is not something that can be just simply dealt with one criterion, especially volumetric criterion.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Bill. Let's see. A number of hands still raised here. Let's go to Angela Schur.
Hi. Yep, I think it was said already, so I'll be very brief. But my concern with using volumetric is the effects of COVID, and I think somebody else already discussed this, so I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I am very concerned about the usage being skewed because of the pandemic. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Let's see. We have Al Capola with their hand raised. Go ahead, Al. Oh, and he just put his hand down. Changed his mind, maybe. All right. Let's see. Let's go back to Natara, calling user 63. Go ahead, Natara. Maybe on mute still. All right, let's come back to Natara in a minute. Let's move on to calling user 72. It's a 646 number beginning in 245.
Tom, my line was just unmuted. Natara.
Oh, okay. I have you under a couple of calling users here, apparently. Go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry, I hung up by accident earlier. I wanted to just make a couple comments. You know, first, without getting into any specifics on the volumetric concerns, which I know have been raised by several of my colleagues, you know, I might want to suggest consideration of, you know, the differences between different regions in the state with respect to volumetric usage. So, you know, without commenting on specific numbers, it's fairly likely that a small commercial customer in the New York City area, like Con Ed territory, may warrant a lower threshold than a business that is upstate, that is, you know, perhaps using a larger facility, and, you know, therefore would require a larger volumetric usage over the annual term. So I want to just throw that out there. I'd also suggest consideration of, you know, a few factors. I'd like to suggest consideration of, you know, a couple of different thresholds that might be used to determine a small commercial customer. So, you know, either perhaps they meet a threshold, or perhaps they are a non-demeter on the electric side, and maybe that's something that can be taken into account. There's a number of factors that, you know, the Commission took into account in determining small and large customers on the DER side, and there are a few different scenarios which would qualify for small and large, and I'd like to suggest that we take the same approach so that there's more flexibility. finally, I respect the consumer advocates, the CULP and UIU positions, particularly with respect to potential customers. What I would appreciate, some clarification on what their interest is in specifically protecting small businesses. My recollection from the evidence.
Natara, we're losing you a little bit. Last thing I heard was you're remembering from the evidentiary hearing.
Oh, okay. We're remembering from the evidentiary hearing, my recollection is that PULP witnesses had clarified that their analysis was, and their advocacy was specific to residential customers and not to the commercial customers. And I'd appreciate if that clarity, if that has changed. But, with respect to comments made a little bit earlier, in looking at sophistication of customers, there's a huge difference in the sophistication of a residential customer, which is not a factor in the small commercial customer analysis. So, I think it's incredibly important that the consumer advocates, when they are making comments with respect to the definition of a small commercial customer, clarify, what they're seeking and which specific customer class they're addressing when they're raising those concerns. We don't want to become a nanny state where we're not allowing commercial customers to make their own decisions. With respect to the restrictions in the December 2019 order, there's a lot that small commercial customers do not have choice anymore that they previously did. And we're hoping through this process, we'll be able to reinstate choice that many of those customers previously had. And the way that we'll do that is through a reasonable definition of small commercial customer. Thank you.
Thank you, Natara. Just a quick reminder before we go on to the next commenter for folks to lower your hand when you're all done speaking. You can do that by hitting *3 again on your phone or by just hitting the raise hand function again to lower it. Next here, I see Katie OHara has a comment. Go ahead, Katie.
Sure, thank you. And I appreciate all the discussion on this issue. I guess for UIU, we advocate on behalf of all consumers, and we saw in the evidentiary hearing proceeding that small commercial customers were not receiving a value from ESCO products. So we continue to be concerned about these ESCO products and making sure that there are appropriate protections for small commercial customers. And I understand that this definition is going to be reevaluated in this Track 2 proceeding. So we'll be looking closely at the analysis provided and just making a decision that's in the best interest of consumers. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. Another comment from Ron Lucas. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I'll just be very quick, but I think it's Richard I want to respond to as far as this rate case analysis and sophistication. First of all, I think if there's larger customers in the rate class, it's actually going to raise the consumption, not lower it. So I didn't really know where it was coming from there. But I think what I really want to point out is that the commission and the rate designs that are going on and the efforts to reduce consumption, like on the electric side, I'm a Con Ed customer, and Con Ed is billing on just delivery charges based on demand charges and asking customers to shift usage from on-peak to off-peak periods. And they have a rate design that's actually billing on demand charge to residential customers. I'm not sure if it's opt-in or opt-out at this point. But so they're asking customers, even residential customers, to be more sophisticated. Now, if you look at on the gas side with the non-pipe solutions, there's National Grid just filed a proposal to allow customers, I think they're going to control customers' thermostats. So there's a big movement now to get people to conserve and reduce peak usage, to get customer involvement and more sophistication on the part of the customer to understand energy usage and those types of issues. And those are services that ESCOs can provide and enhance. So I don't think it's just a one-way street that it's just based on usage, and residential and small commercial are not sophisticated. I think we're moving in that direction. So I think that needs to balance out a lot of comments what Richard said, and obviously we'll have further discussion about that. But I just didn't want to leave that hanging.
Great, thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
We do have another call-in user. It's call-in user 69. It's a 914 area code. Go ahead.
I assume that's me. This is Dan Singer from Robeson Energy. Thanks for recognizing me. I just wanted to expand upon something that I think Natara touched on, and it's certainly something we can go deeper when we have a deeper session on the definition of small commercial. But it's the volumetric definition. We think strongly that it really needs to be looked at differently from a downstate versus upstate or different regions of the state, and should be somehow correlated to the perhaps a 30-year average of degree days or something of that sort. A 400 decatherm business that uses gas primarily for heat in Brooklyn is very different than a 400 decatherm user in Watertown, having one blanket approach for with the diversity of climates around the state is a bit of a broad brush that may not fit everywhere.
Understood. Thank you for that. It looks like we've narrowed down the call-in users, the folks with their hand raised. I do want to note that we've been going for about 2 hours now, and I know at least I could use a quick comfort break. So I think maybe we'll take just a 5-minute break. Folks can stretch their legs and the like, and we'll get started again at 11:04. So again, just a quick break, and we're going to get started again at 11:04. In the meantime, if anyone has any other questions or comments to make on this issue, please feel free to raise your hand, and we will address those when we return. Thanks. All right, folks, it's 11:04. Let's get started again. Robin, could you get us back down to the slides on the definition of small non-residential customers, please? All right, let's go ahead and start the slideshow up again. Oh, no. Just start it from the current slide. Great. So again, you know, I want to provide an opportunity if anyone else has any additional questions or comments on this definition. I see it looks like, let's see, calling user 72, I believe it's Nutara still has her hand raised. Nutara, did you have an additional comment to make, or was that from before? Looks like it was from before. She's lowered her hand. Great. All right, so then let's move on to our next topic of discussion. The utility provided price comparisons and cost itemizations. This, you know, was an issue that we included in today's meeting based off a number of comments from interested stakeholders. I will just read a few of the quotes here from the December 2019 order for context. The commission stated that the on-bill comparison suggested by staff and POLP is a promising method for empowering customers to make informed choices, and therefore the commission supports this comparison as a requirement placed on utilities bills on behalf of ESCO. Excuse me, on behalf of ESCOs. The commission also finds that customers could benefit from a bill that contains a chart showing the preceding 12-month period and a comparison of the ESCO price paid by the customer and the price the utility would have charged over that term. An ideal price comparison would also identify the difference between those two 12-month amounts in a manner that unambiguously conveys whether the customer is saving money or paying a premium for the ESCO service over that time period. You know, the commission was also mindful of the need to consider individual characteristics of utilities billing systems. It directed that staff collaborate with utilities to develop individualized billing plans that set forth for each utility a timely and cost-effective pathway towards maximizing the dissemination of useful price comparison information to customers. And finally, the commission stated that their conclusions on itemized billing are consistent with the findings in the previous section of the order addressing utility price comparisons. The commission finds that ESCO customers could meaningfully compare service and products among the various energy retailers if they had itemized ESCO pricing data. And just for additional context on that, when it talks about itemized pricing data, what the order was referring to at that point was an itemization of the various components of the ESCO product that is bundled with commodity. So, you know, the commodity potentially being one line item, and then in addition to that, a line item for, you know, the purchase of RECs or the provision of a home warranty product, something like that, to really help the customer understand, you know, what they're paying for as part of these bundled products. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so, you know, staff received comments on the price comparison cost and cost itemization directives from the December 2019 order, many of which stated that ESCOs should be involved in the establishment of these joint billing plans. And I include here in the presentation staff's anticipated process for how this would unfold. Again, the directive was for staff to work with the utilities directly to evaluate the individual billing system capabilities and the development of these plans. I think that that would still be the initial step, for staff to work directly with the individual utilities to understand their capabilities. And then ultimately with a joint filing by staff and the utilities of the individual billing plans for consideration by the commission, at which point ESCOs and other interested stakeholders would be provided an opportunity to comment on those billing plans. Not mentioned on the slide here, but worth referencing is, the alternative process that commission laid out, that if ultimately staff and the utilities could not come to an agreement on an individual billing plan, that staff would propose something for parties to comment on and for commission consideration. And then just some specific issues regarding cost itemizations. Some things that to be considered. Again, this is talking about really breaking out the various components of the ESCO bundled product. How this information could be transferred under existing or new EDI or electronic data interchange data transfers. Potential bill messaging for the ESCOs to provide additional information on the utility bill. The kind of a higher level issue of ESCO product pricing and unbundling of commodity and additional offerings. And then, as briefly alluded to earlier in the presentation, additional methods other than on the traditional utility bill for providing customers with information that itemizes the cost associated with ESCO services. So we have this proposed process here, and I did kind of incorporate the general comments that we received on this point. So I guess I'll just pause there now to see if folks have any questions, comment, concerns, whether it's utilities or the ESCO industry. Please, now's an opportunity. All right, not seeing anyone with their hand raised right now. We did have a technical question regarding how to raise your hand if you're on the phone. Again, if you're on the phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *3, and you also hit *3 to then lower your hand again afterward. All right, we do have one hand raised here from Katie O'Hare. Go ahead. Oh, wait, well, there you go. Go ahead, Katie.
Thank you. This is Katie O'Hare from UAU. I was just seeking clarity. It says that the individual utilities or staff will be filing a plan for how to enact these provisions in the billing system. Is that something that we'll be talking about in the stakeholder meetings, or we'll just be looking for the filing on DMM and then parties can comment on it?
Good point of clarification. This, at least from staff's perspective, was not an issue to be addressed in Track 2. Again, I noted a number of ESCOs did wish to have some input or participation in this process, and I think their participation would be in, it'll be through our more typical notice and comment proceeding, where we'll work on these individual billing plans that take into consideration individual utilities' capabilities, file something in the docket for all stakeholders to review and comment.
Okay, thank you. That's a helpful clarification.
All right. Well, with that, if there are no additional questions or comments on this issue, no sense in belaboring that. Let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, and I believe this is our last topic to tee up today. And this one is one that was purely raised by interested stakeholders related to the Integrated Energy Data Resource, or IEDR, or EDR, take your pick, that was adopted in the Commission's Strategic Use of Energy-Related Data proceeding. The case number, as you can see there at the top, is 20M0082. The Commission issued a February 11th order earlier this year implementing an integrated energy data resource. And, just a couple quotes from that order. The Commission stated that the creation of the EDR will provide New York's energy stakeholders with a platform that enables the effective access and use of such integrated energy customer data and energy system data. The Commission directed the implementation of an EDR that securely collects, integrates, and provides useful access to large and diverse set of energy-related information on a statewide data platform. So for folks that may not be familiar, sort of in a nutshell, the Integrated Energy Data Resource would be sort of a statewide data platform that is populated, at least in the first instance, by the distribution utilities, and that would be kind of like a one-stop platform for entities such as ESCOs, DER providers, and the like, to access customer data in almost every instance with customer consent, as well as system data. And it also potentially seeks to pull in other demographic, even publicly available demographic data to help with the identification of products and services that would best serve certain customers. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. These were some of the comments we received on the EDR, and the first here is someone recommended that coordination between this Track 2 proceeding and the EDR proceeding would be beneficial. The data and use cases developed in the EDR proceeding can be a starting point to discuss the approval process for innovative products that offer value to the mass market in this Track 2 proceeding. And that we should recognize that the IEDR proceeding is especially useful as the Commission has already provided input on the prioritization of use cases that benefit the state. Another commenter here that the IEDR proceeding developed a well-defined and easy-to-understand form for stakeholders to profile either use cases. A form for proposed new ESCO product offerings could include information similar to that. And that another area of the EDR process that should be replicated in this proceeding is the gradual expansion of the number of use cases, in this instance, new ESCO products, over time. So just a couple points that I had on this, and then I really wanted to push this over to the industry, particularly the folks that had these comments, to provide some clarity and context as to where they thought the coordination between these two processes could go. Regarding the form that was mentioned for the identification of use cases, that was a form that was created in collaboration between NYSERDA and the department to identify the first, I think, roughly 5 or so use cases, and it provided some basic information, excuse me, regarding the uses of that data and how it would be populated in the IEDR, everything, consent, all various issues to be addressed with those specific use cases. It seems to be that the proposal here is to kind of create a form similar to that for the proposal of additional ESCO products and services. While I don't want to completely foreclose that outright, I do think that the identification of additional use cases that ultimately then will be decided on by the Commission is probably maybe a less intensive process than we're going to go through here with the identification of additional energy-related value-added products or services, and that, in compliance with the Commission's directive, identifying such additional products may likely require more than just filling out a form and then having some comment on that. I do think the place to start the ball rolling on those is in these collaborative discussions. Open to folks' thoughts on that as well. And just kind of a general point on that last bullet about the gradual expansion of new ESCO products over time. I do think that's why we're here in this track 2 proceeding. Going all the way back to the evidentiary hearings and the December 2019 order, that really is the primary focus of this track 2 process. The commission established a short list of products and services that ESCOs could offer in the New York market to mass market customers, but provided this track 2 collaborative process as a means to evaluate additional products and potentially expand that list. I'll stop there and I'll see if folks have any comments or questions. Again, I don't know if the folks who made these comments are with us today on the call, but it would be helpful to kind of understand how you're envisioning this coordination between the 2 proceedings. Oh, and one other thing I will note before we get to the comments is that the IEDR process is going to be an iterative process. I don't expect that this thing's going to be up and running, first quarter of next year. So to the extent we're, the potential reliance on that leader for data transfers or things like that, this is it is a large undertaking as recognized by staff and the commission, and it's not necessarily something that will be completed in the short term. Let's go to the commenters here. I see Alex Judd with his hand raised. Go ahead, Alex.
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
A proposal that I had, but I definitely commented on this topic on behalf of a couple ESCOs. And the thought here, just to provide a little bit of clarity, was not necessarily at all related to use cases themselves, the way the IEDR proceeding you teed up in your kind of background is looking at them, but really just to talk about defined categories to provide, essentially a more kind of streamlined path for approval where there's some kind of predefined categories up front approved by the commission and some questions that I think you had talked about really at the beginning of this presentation around, benefits to the customers of the state, benefits to, the state's clean energy goals, and those kind of, questions that you would want or anybody would want answered when putting forth, the specifics of one of these predefined categories. But the reason that we were thinking of this proposal to begin with is that it allows, flexibility, innovation, technology, things that, we don't necessarily know today that can be developed over time with this kind of discussed and, with stakeholder input and pre-approved categories, but that kind of inherent flexibility where an individual concept within that predefined category could be discussed. That would allow, for ESCOs really to develop their own products that they see fit based on what the market is at the time. I'll leave it at that. Happy to answer any questions you have. I appreciate you bringing it up, and hopefully we get to discuss this a little bit more, because I think there is, some synergies between that proceeding and this proceeding, even though, here it's obviously not use case related. It's energy value added products.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments particularly related to this? Yeah, Katie O'Hare. Let's go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate this discussion. I will have to take this back to UAU, but just at first glance, again, I think the focus in this case needs to be, are these proposed products actually providing meaningful energy savings to customers? So I'd be concerned about using another forum in this proceeding. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you. We do have another call-in user, call-in user 29. It's a 518 number. that begins with 469.
Yes, hi, Tom. It's Bill Yates from Pulp again.
Hey, Bill.
Hi. Can you tell me, what sorts of issues have been presented in the category of consent? This would be something that would be this, definite concern to Pulp. What constitutes consent? Have considerations been given to things like, the language that the customer speaks? Are we going to present materials in their spoken language or are other kinds of considerations involving consent?
Absolutely, and I don't want to get too far afield in this conversation as to what's happening over there with the IEDR process, but I mean, consent is obviously a key part when it comes to data sharing, and as the commission has said on a number of occasions, the data, though housed by the utility, is the customer's data and should be shared consistent with the customer's consent. Things like providing agreements and the like in the customer's native language are all part, as they're part of the ESCO rules now, are also being advanced as part of the consent requirements that would be implicated for the IEDR, and really more generally for the related data access framework process that kind of, like I said, it generally goes towards some of those type of more I think general issues related to the sharing of energy related data.
Thanks, and just a quick follow-up as well. Do the rules that have been established in that proceeding and more generally by the commission also apply to, how is the treatment of situations where an ESCO might, release that data to a third party? How would the data, the personal data issues be treated for those purposes?
So the data access framework process does establish, again, I'm not getting too far into it, a data ready certification process that would require entities to basically go through a audit process to determine that they have both the cybersecurity protections in place to directly connect and receive data from the utility, as well as the privacy protections in place to ensure that data that the ESE or the ESCO in this instance is housing is not released to unauthorized third parties, and that the ESCO is using the data consistent with its authorization.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's see. So there's a few people with their hand raised still. It's Katie O'Hara, and Alex Judd. Let's check and see. Alex, did you have another comment?
Yeah, no, thanks, Tom. It's Alex from Day Pitney again. I just wanted to provide, based on this discussion, just that further clarity that really the proposal is not at all meant to deal with the data sharing. It was really a form that was developed in that proceeding we thought might be useful over here, where you have, just to throw out one complete hypothetical, EV charging is something that is discussed in there as a topic for data sharing. Something similar, in theory could be used in this proceeding where, EV plans are, obviously discussed with stakeholders and pre-approved on this form. And then you start to answer some of the questions that Katie, I think, rightfully mentioned, which is, how does it provide meaningful benefit to the state, and how does it further the state's plans and those kind of things. But I just wanted to make clear again that this is really meant to be in the context of how these particular energy value products can be provided by ESCOs, nothing to do with data sharing that's being handled in that separate proceeding. This is just a corollary of that we thought was something the commission's kind of already familiar with, and staff is, and seemed like a useful process to provide parameters, but also streamline this process here. Thanks, Tom.
Great, thank you for that clarification. All right, I don't see any other folks with their hand raised. So unless anyone else has any comments on this, I think we'll move to the next slide here. And this is really our wrap-up slide regarding next steps. As I mentioned earlier, I think we'll have, I know we'll have future meetings on individual topics. And also, as I mentioned, it's my proposal that maybe the next meeting would address green gas. And as part of that, I think it would be helpful to have maybe some stakeholder presentations. So to the extent folks are interested in, providing a presentation on that, we ask that you reach out to staff directly. We'll have our contact information on the next slide. To express that willingness, and we'll work with the companies to get a presentation on the following meeting. There's also just kind of filling thoughts out there process-wise. The idea of potential subgroups of interested stakeholders to develop a collaborative report or proposal for commission consideration. I understand that these stakeholder meetings can be time-consuming, and not everyone is necessarily interested in every topic. So, it's not expected that everyone needs to participate in every single one. But I do want to keep an eye, or just keep in the back of our mind at least, where do we take all of this process once we've had these meetings, and how do we get it before the commission? And again, I think for SAS part, the clearest way to do that, sort of consistent with the commission's directive, would be for collaborative reports and proposals that were filed by groups of ESCOs or groups of stakeholders combined to submit for commission consideration. And then I'll just pause for additional thoughts. Well, I'll give folks an opportunity if you have any questions or comments on the process, but I will have Robin hop over to the last slide with our contact information. You'll see the email from for myself, Chris Posey, and Robin Taylor. I'm sure many of you know how to contact us, but just in case, we encourage folks to reach out with questions both on the process and on the substance. And as I mentioned, for anyone who's interested in providing a presentation at future meetings. And I will note, you don't need to reach out just because you're interested and you want to provide comments at a future meeting. I anticipate that to the extent any meetings are done remotely, we would use this same process where folks can freely raise their hand and make comments. Really specifically looking for folks that want to actually lead a discussion and provide a presentation. If you're interested in doing that, please let us know. So again, any additional thoughts? I don't see any hands raised now. I think if we don't hear anything either here or via email in the future, it will be staff's plan to schedule the next collaborative meeting to discuss green gas issues. And as Angela Shore from the Green Mountain Companies offered, we'll likely be reaching out to you, Angela, to potentially provide a presentation at that, but certainly that's not to the exclusion of other interested stakeholders who may also want to provide something at that meeting. Again, so I don't see anyone else's hand raised. I'll take that there are no other questions at this time, but again, feel free to reach out to Robin, Chris, or myself if questions come up in the future. I'll reiterate that this meeting has been recorded. We'll be posting the recording as well as the slide presentation on the commission website under these 3 retail access proceedings. With that, I'll bring this to a close. I really want to thank everyone for their participation today. A lot of thoughtful comments and insight here. And again, this is just the first of what will likely be a series of meetings as we address these issues raised by both the industry and specifically directed to be addressed in track 2 by the commission. So again, thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.